They never really noticed me. Not in the way people notice those who speak the loudest or stand in the spotlight. I didn't dress to be remembered. I didn't correct people when they assumed I was just another mid-level manager. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Being underestimated was never a disadvantage for me, it was insulation. It gave me the one thing no one could buy with a promotion or a louder voice: perspective. My name is Nina Caldwell. I've worked at Colin Tech for just over 8 years, long enough to watch 3 product launches crash and burn, to sit through 2 major rounds of layoffs, and to carry my team through a global crisis that nearly brought us to our knees. I've been here through every version of this company: the hopeful one, the broken one, the one trying too hard to look like it had everything together. I never cared about flashy titles. I never asked for my name to be printed at the top of a memo or projected on a presentation slide. But what most people didn't know was that I held something far more valuable than a corner office. I held the power to decide who stayed, who rose, and who didn't make it to the next fiscal quarter. Not because of some secret plan or corporate ambition, but because, in our darkest hour, I chose to act when no one else could. It happened during the second year of the crisis. Our CEO, usually confident to the point of arrogance, came to a meeting pale and shaking. He told us, in plain terms, that we were out of options. A hostile takeover was weeks away unless we secured a cash infusion the board had no way to guarantee. He looked around the table, and for once, not a single voice interrupted him. Everyone understood. It wasn't just our jobs at risk. It was the company itself. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, staring at the file that held the last tangible memory of my grandmother, a trust fund she left me with one note attached: use it when it matters. I never imagined it would go toward a tech company's survival. But in that moment, it did matter. I liquidated the assets through a holding company registered out of state. No one knew the name on the paperwork. That was intentional. I didn't want recognition. I wanted Colin to make it through. With that investment, I became the majority shareholder. Quietly. Privately. No interviews. No press. Not even a whisper across the executive floor. I went back to work the next day like nothing had happened. And for the next 3 years, I kept it that way. When the company began to recover, no one asked how. No one thought to look. They were just grateful to still have desks to sit at. But if I've learned anything over the years, it's that the most dangerous people in business aren't the ones making noise. It's the ones who think they know the room without ever checking who's actually in it. People like that never see the quiet ones coming. They don't recognize steady hands or silent leverage. And that's what makes them vulnerable. I didn't plan to use that leverage. I hoped I'd never need to. But storms have a way of finding you, no matter how quietly you walk. And the next one, the one that would test every piece of who I was, had already begun to form. I just hadn't met him yet. His name was Jacob Moore. I remember the first time I saw him walk through the front doors of Colin Tech like he owned the air around him. Tall, polished, confident in the way only someone freshly appointed and freshly certain can be. A Stanford MBA, according to the announcement email. Impressive to most. Predictable to me. He introduced himself at the next leadership huddle, sleeves rolled up like he'd already started saving the company. "We're entering a new era," he said, voice booming, smile practiced. "It's time to get lean, get smart, and get ahead." Half the room nodded. The other half stayed quiet. I just watched. Jacob had the vocabulary of a man raised on case studies and executive coaching. He said things like synergy and pipeline velocity without flinching. Every slide deck he shared looked like it was built for a TED Talk. And every decision he made came with a follow-up email full of words, but short on understanding. At first, I gave him space. Change isn't always bad. And in truth, we had become complacent in some corners. But it didn't take long to see the difference between leading and conquering. Jacob didn't walk into rooms to listen. He walked in to claim them. Within his first month, he began cutting roles. First the admin support staff, then mid-level project managers, then entire teams in product development. These weren't underperformers. These were people who had built this place from the ground up, who had held it together through the worst. Suddenly, they were told they no longer aligned with the company's evolving vision. Jacob liked to phrase things that way. like a consultant trying to make termination sound like growth. In meetings, he spoke over people. In emails, he CC'd everyone, ensuring his fingerprints were visible on every conversation. The room always shifted when he walked in. Not with respect, but with caution. He never once asked me what I did, not even out of courtesy. I'd built the analytics division from scratch, developed systems that prevented multi-million-dollar losses, led the most successful client migration in the company's history. But to him, I was background noise, a leftover, another name on an outdated org chart. I started keeping quiet notes, not because I planned to use them, not yet, but because something about him told me he wasn't just here for the title. He wanted control, all of it, and he didn't care who he had to erase to get it. His vision of leadership wasn't collaboration, it was dominance. He liked to hear his own voice fill a room, liked to re-explain things people already understood, just so he could be the one saying them. I once counted how many times he said, "Let me simplify this for you," in a single week. 17. It was clear he thought people like me didn't matter. I didn't posture. I didn't challenge him publicly, didn't flash credentials or climb into the spotlight. That's where he made his first mistake. He assumed silence meant insignificance. He never stopped to ask who had held the company up while others watched it fall. And in a place like Colin, where perception can shift overnight, that kind of oversight isn't just careless. It's fatal. Jacob Moore didn't know me. Not yet. But he would. It happened on a Thursday morning. The sky outside was heavy with clouds, the kind that looked like they were still deciding whether or not to break. I was at my desk, reviewing a new data model, when Jacob's assistant appeared in the doorway. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. "Jacob would like to see you." Conference room B. No context. No explanation. Just now. I saved my file, gathered my laptop, and walked down the hallway. My heels echoed against the polished tile, each step sharper than usual. The silence in the corridor felt different that morning. Not quiet, but expectant. Like something just beneath the surface was waiting to happen. When I entered the room, Jacob was already seated at the head of the table. The blinds were drawn too tightly, and the overhead lights made the space feel sterile, almost theatrical. He didn't look up right away, just tapped something on his tablet and said, without emotion, "Let's keep this brief." I sat down across from him, calm, present, but fully alert. He finally looked at me. "I've been reviewing your department's output," he said, voice smooth but sharp around the edges. "And frankly, I'm not impressed." I didn't react. Not yet. The tools your team has built are outdated. The reporting lacks innovation. And there's no clear initiative being taken. It feels like you've plateaued. I blinked once. That was all. "Outdated," I said. "According to what?" He shrugged, as if specifics were beneath him. "Industry trends. Gut instinct. Either way, the outcome is the same." Then he leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced like a man delivering final judgment. "You're replaceable. You add nothing here." The words landed with the intention of impact, like a hammer meant to crack glass. But nothing inside me shattered, because I had heard this tone before. From other rooms, other men, people who believed power was in their title, not in their awareness. So I smiled. Not big, just enough. He didn't like that. His eyes narrowed. "I'm being serious," he said. "I know," I replied, still holding the smile. "And that's what makes it funny." He straightened up, visibly annoyed. "If you find this amusing, maybe it's time for you to leave. We can formalize that today." I met his gaze directly. Still calm. "Then fire me." He paused. "Excuse me, you said I'm replaceable. If you believe that, fire me. Call HR. Fill out the paperwork. Walk me out. Don't circle it. Own it." Silence stretched between us. Not awkward. Electric. And in that moment, something shifted. I saw it in his face. Confusion. Not just because I didn't flinch, but because I didn't play the part he'd already written for me. He expected fear, resistance, maybe even pleading. But I wasn't holding on to this job out of desperation. I wasn't clinging to my position. He thought I was trapped inside a box he controlled. But he didn't know that I had built the room. He had no idea who needed to sign off on his next promotion. No clue who could approve or quietly block every restructuring plan he had in the pipeline. As I stood up and collected my things, I gave him a polite nod. No anger. No parting words. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks out of the room, steady and silent. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest thing you'll ever hear. By Friday, the air at Colin had changed. Not in any loud or obvious way, but people notice things. How someone leaves a meeting. How they carry themselves afterward. Word didn't spread through announcements or emails. It never does in places like this. It spreads through whispers, glances, and pauses that last just a little too long. After I walked out of that conference room with Jacob, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew he was already recalibrating, repositioning, rewriting the version of the conversation he would share with others. But the thing about people like Jacob is, they never think they need to fact-check the room before they claim it. He thought I'd be rattled, that I'd come crawling back. But I wasn't rattled. I was ready. Because I knew something he didn't. And that kind of knowledge, the kind you keep quietly tucked away, becomes a different kind of leverage. The kind that waits. That morning I got a call from Michelle, our head of legal, and someone I've trusted for years. Her voice was calm, but precise. Nina, I just finished reviewing the latest board prep file. Jacob submitted a proposed restructuring plan. I already knew where this was going. Your name's not in it, she said. He's proposing a transition of the analytics division, eliminating your role entirely. I let the silence hang just long enough. And here's where it gets interesting, she continued. He listed the majority shareholder approval as pending. Of course he did. He doesn't know, I said. Michelle added, no, he doesn't. I smiled. He doesn't have a clue. Jacob Moore, with all his ambition and polish, had no idea that the woman he'd just tried to erase was the same person whose signature he needed to move forward. He didn't know that the ownership structure of Colin ran straight through a name he never bothered to learn. That was his mistake. Assuming knowledge came with visibility. That power had to announce itself to exist. He never once asked how the company had survived the year we nearly lost it all. Never once questioned how we kept the doors open without selling off our assets. He was so busy performing leadership, he forgot to learn the history of the place he wanted to reshape. And now, he'd boxed himself in. Because that single line in his proposal, approval pending, wasn't a formality. It was a requirement. Without it, nothing moved forward. Not the structure. Not the cuts. Not his plan to phase me out. Michelle's voice came through the line again, more cautious now. You could stop this today. I don't want to stop it, I said. I want him to walk straight into it. Because people like Jacob don't learn through feedback. They learn through impact. Through consequence. And his was already in motion. That afternoon, I reviewed the documents quietly. Financials. Operational notes. Board prep files. Then I opened the folder where I kept the ownership paperwork, the one no one else had seen. It still felt unreal sometimes. Even to me. But the math didn't lie. Neither did the contracts. I closed my laptop, feeling the tension settle. Not in my shoulders. But somewhere deeper. A quiet weight. Not fear. Anticipation. Monday would come soon. Jacob would take his seat at the table with his slides and his vision. He'd speak as if the outcome had already been decided. And I would be sitting just a few chairs away, waiting for the moment he realized. He had submitted his own downfall in writing, with my name on the dotted line. He never thought to check. Monday came, sharp and cold. The kind of winter morning where the light felt too clear, too honest. I dressed with intention. Not flashy, just precise. A tailored navy blazer. Clean white blouse. Hair pulled back. The look of someone people don't overlook twice. When I entered the boardroom, it was already half full. Michelle caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. I took my usual seat, far end of the table. No title plate. No fanfare. Just there. Jacob arrived 10 minutes later, shoulders back, confidence radiating off him like heat. He greeted the chairman, exchanged a few pleasantries, then opened his folder like a man about to present a masterpiece. Good morning, he began. Voice smooth, polished. I'd like to begin with a vision. A leaner, more agile call-in tech. One that cuts through outdated systems and accelerates innovation. He clicked through slides. Charts, growth projections, buzzwords. All delivered with practiced cadence. And then came the last section. In order to streamline operations, I'm proposing a structural change to the analytics division. We'll transition Nina Caldwell's role to an external advisory capacity. Her duties will be reassigned to a more agile team of junior staff. He said it cleanly, casually, without even glancing in my direction. A few board members shifted in their seats. Michelle stayed still, watching him like a storm waiting for the wind to change. Then the chairman spoke. We'll need majority shareholder approval for any structural change at that level. Jacob nodded quickly. Yes, of course. That's listed as pending. I was under the impression it wouldn't be an issue. I cleared my throat, calm, steady. I'm afraid I can't approve that. Jacob blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. He turned toward me confused. With all due respect. Nah, I interrupted. You don't have the authority to. I do, I said, reaching into my folder. I placed a single sheet of paper on the table and slid it toward the chairman. Ownership structure. Verified. Legal. Irrefutable. Michelle leaned forward and confirmed it. Nina is the majority shareholder through Caldwell Holdings. It's been valid since the last capital raise. The silence in the room felt like gravity had shifted. Jacob stared at me, lips parting, as if a word might save him, then closing again. When none came, his face drained. Not because of the document, because of the realization. He had walked into this meeting thinking he was in control. Every slide, every word, had carved what he believed was a path forward. He never even thought to ask who had to sign off. The chairman looked down at the paper, then up at Jacob. Well, he said quietly, that certainly changes things. Jacob turned red, his voice thinner now. Why didn't anyone tell me? I didn't flinch. Because you didn't ask. You assumed. He opened his mouth again. But there was nothing left to say. Nothing that wouldn't echo back with consequence. The chairman stood. We'll take a short recess. Nah, I said. If you could stay for a moment. As the others filed out, Jacob remained in his seat, motionless. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. His silence told me everything. Because that morning, Jacob Moore finally realized the boardroom wasn't his kingdom. It was mine. And I was just getting started. The day after the board meeting, call-in tech felt different. Not loud, not chaotic, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after something shifts beneath the surface. But no one knows yet how deep the cracks go. Jacob didn't look at me when we passed in the hallway. He smiled at others, nodded at a few junior executives, moved with the same polished confidence. But it had changed. The edge in his voice was duller. His eyes moved faster, calculating. He was already strategizing his next move. I knew better than to expect a direct confrontation. Jacob was too careful for that. Too image-conscious. He wouldn't yell. Wouldn't accuse. He'd adjust the system quietly, inch by inch, until the damage could be explained away as oversight. It started small. My team suddenly lost access to 2 of our core analytics dashboards. Tools we had built, maintained, relied on for years. When I asked IT, they said the change came from an executive directive. Streamlining workflows, they called it. No one could confirm whose directive. Next came the calendar disruptions. A major presentation, one I had prepared for weeks, was canceled without warning. I only found out because my calendar sent me a notification saying the meeting was removed. When I followed up, Jacob's assistant said the session had been reassigned to better align with operational leadership. Then came the whispers. Nothing direct. Nothing traceable. Just a few sideways comments passed through department heads. That I'd been disengaging. Missing meetings. Withdrawing from cross-functional discussions. It was strategic. Intentional. A slow erosion. Not of my work, but of perception. He wanted to reframe me as the problem. Uncooperative. Difficult. A legacy leader unwilling to adapt. I didn't push back. I didn't correct the narrative, not publicly. Instead, I documented everything. Every access change. Every canceled invite. Every reshuffled meeting. I kept screenshots, logged timestamps, saved email threads. My inbox became a ledger. My calendar, a timeline. Then something unexpected happened. I received an anonymous message through our internal employee portal. Thank you. You don't know me, but I've watched him steamroll half my team these past few weeks. It means a lot to see someone finally stop him. No name, no department. Just a quiet message from someone who had been holding their breath for too long. By the next afternoon, 5 more came in. Then 12. Some were short. Others were pages long. Timelines. Patterns. Stories of private reprimands, veiled threats, performance reviews rewritten after one conversation. People who had worked here for years, suddenly made to feel like strangers in their own departments. I didn't respond to the messages. I archived them into a separate folder. Not for revenge. For proof. Because I knew Jacob. Men like him don't disappear after one bad meeting. They rebrand. Regroup. Come back through a different door. And sure enough, late Wednesday evening, a memo landed in my inbox. Subject line, Reevaluation of Departmental Efficiency. It came from Jacob's office. Flagged for immediate review. It requested access to performance data across analytics and finance. On the surface, it looked like routine oversight. But I knew what it was. It was a weapon. Disguised as process. I picked up the phone and called Michelle. I think it's time we take this up a notch. You want to initiate an internal audit? No, I said. Not yet. But I want a record. Everything he's done since that meeting. Off the record? Thorough. Quiet. There was a pause. Then her voice came through steady. Understood. That night, I stayed late. Not because I had to. Because I was preparing. The war had started. Not with a bang. But with a door closing softly behind me. The Ethics Committee hearing was set for Tuesday at 9 a.m. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not out of nerves. By choice. I wanted them to see. I wasn't hiding. I had nothing to cover. Nothing to excuse. Just facts. The executive conference room was quiet. Unusually so. No light chatter. No casual remarks. Just silence. Broken only by the soft click of laptop keys. And the rustle of notes being reviewed. Michelle met me just outside the door. She didn't need to ask if I was ready. She already knew. Inside, the board members were already seated. The chairman. The CFO. 2 senior advisors. Colin's external HR counsel. An empty chair waited for Jacob. He arrived at exactly 8:59. Still polished. Still composed. But the confidence that usually clung to him sat looser now. Like a jacket one size too big. He greeted the room with a smooth, professional tone. Good morning. Appreciate everyone being here. The chairman nodded. His voice was formal, clipped. Jacob, you've been invited to respond to several internal concerns raised about your leadership conduct over the past 6 weeks. You'll have time to present your perspective. Then we'll hear from Nina. Jacob gave me a glance. Brief. Controlled. Then opened his folder. And began. I believe what we're dealing with is a matter of operational misalignment, Jacob began. I was brought in to optimize performance. Some individuals have unfortunately taken those changes personally, particularly those involving role adjustments and departmental restructuring. He spoke in polished corporate phrases. Cold. Distant. Like he was narrating a slide deck. Then came the shift. Nina Caldwell has been an asset to this company, he said, but her recent behavior has changed. She's withdrawn from key projects, resisted collaborative input, and contributed to an atmosphere of tension, according to several colleagues. He paused. Let the words sit. While I regret that our dynamic has become strained, I believe this is less about misconduct and more about a difference in working styles. I'd like to move past it and refocus on results. He leaned back slightly, signaling that he was done. Then it was my turn. I didn't stand. I didn't change my tone. I simply opened my folder. I'd like to clarify a few points. I passed out printed timelines. Each copy organized, dated, cross-referenced. A clear account of every meeting I was excluded from. Every access revoked. Every communication reassigned without explanation. These were not oversight errors. They were intentional removals. And they began immediately after the board was made aware of my shareholder status. The board members flipped through the pages quietly. I've also received internal messages from employees across multiple departments, people who've experienced similar tactics. Abrupt changes. No transparency. No room to question decisions without consequence. I reached into my briefcase and placed a second folder on the table. Inside were anonymized reports. First-hand accounts of intimidation. Isolation. The room changed then. Not loudly. Just a stillness that came from something settling into place. And finally, I said, I received a forwarded email. Jacob sent it to the chairman and 2 board members. It describes me as disengaged and unreliable. He cited meetings I was removed from without my knowledge as proof of my absence. He created the void, then used it as evidence. I closed my folder. Nothing dramatic. Just done. Jacob shifted. His voice rose slightly. These are one-sided accounts. Anonymous. You can't treat that as fact. Michelle responded, calm and firm. We've confirmed several of Nina's claims independently. IT logs verify the access removals. HR has flagged similar concerns that were never escalated. The chairman leaned forward. Jacob, your role was to lead with clarity. Instead, you created confusion, exclusion, and fear. That is not the culture we uphold. Jacob's voice cracked. The mask finally slipping. This is a setup. You let her trap me. I looked at him. Not with anger, just clarity. No, you trapped yourself. You underestimated the one person who wouldn't stay quiet. The chairman stood. Effective immediately, Jacob Moore is suspended pending formal review. Security will escort you following this meeting. A statement will go out to the executive team by end of day. Jacob didn't argue. He stood slowly, face pale, expression hollow. I built this. No, I said quietly. You nearly destroyed it. And then he left. No words. No defense. Just a door closing behind him. And the room exhaled. Jacob didn't come back. No emails. No farewell drinks. No carefully worded announcement from HR. He simply vanished, leaving behind an office with blinds still half closed, and a calendar full of canceled meetings. The company didn't erupt in celebration. There were no high fives. No victory laps. What came instead was something quieter. People started making eye contact again. Conversations in the break room returned without tension. Meetings began to feel like meetings, not performance reviews in disguise. I didn't step into a spotlight. I stepped back into my work. The board approached me a week later. They asked if I would stay on as interim executive director of strategic operations. I said yes, but with conditions. I want full reinstatement of the teams that were quietly sidelined, access restored, decision-making distributed, and I want a new leadership code, not as a suggestion, but as a requirement. Clear ethics, real accountability. Every promotion, every hire, every seat at the table. The chairman didn't hesitate. You have it. I didn't want the role for status. I wanted the leverage to rebuild what had been corroded from the inside out. So I started small. I met with every department head in person. I reopened the channels Jacob had shut down. I invited anonymous feedback, not filtered through layers of fear or approval chains. I listened, really listened. And over time, the messages changed. One came from a junior analyst I had never spoken to before. When I saw you speak in that meeting, I realized I didn't have to be afraid to speak up anymore. Another simply said, you made me believe we could be led by someone who actually sees us. Those words stayed with me, because that's what it all came down to in the end. Not power, not titles, just being seen, and making others feel seen in return. A month after Jacob's removal, the board called another meeting. This time, not for discipline, but for direction. The chairman asked me to stop by his office before it began. I assumed we'd be reviewing the candidate pool for Jacob's replacement. Instead, he handed me a formal letter. My name printed cleanly across the top. Permanent Executive Director of Strategic Operations. I read it once, then again. I didn't ask for this, I said softly. I know, he replied. That's why you're the right choice. I took a breath. Nodded once. If I accept, I want more than a title. I want a seat at every strategic table. Not for optics. For impact. You'll have it. And I want every person Jacob tried to erase to have their voice amplified. No more silencing talent because it doesn't fit someone else's mold. You're shaping the culture now, he said. We're following your lead. That night, after everyone had left, I stood in the hallway outside what used to be Jacob's office. I opened the door slowly. Let the quiet settle in. The room looked smaller now. Not physically, just stripped of the shadow that once filled it. I took down the old nameplate from the glass wall. I didn't replace it with mine. Instead, I had a new one made. Simple matte finish. 3 words. Integrity is not optional. That's what leadership is to me now. Not about controlling outcomes. Not about managing perception. But about creating a space where people feel safe to do the work. And to be recognized for it. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet act of showing up day after day and rebuilding what someone else tried to tear down. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay exactly who you are, even when someone else tries to rewrite your story.